just start out with saying how polite Jeffrey was, respectful, had a very big heart, felt sorry for people, and the biggest smile.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, it's April and welcome back to my channel. I've got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a minor in psychology, and I'm going to say that for the next 5 videos because I'm just so proud of myself. On top of that, I'm a board member for a nonprofit called Voices for the Silenced, and we helped family members and loved ones of missing people in the West Virginia area get the resources they need in aid for their search. So if you have a missing loved one in the West Virginia or surrounding areas, please get a hold of us and we'll do what we can. And here we are once again to talk about Jeffrey Crawford. If you have followed me for any amount of time, you know this is actually the first case I completely dived into, especially with family. And there has been a little bit of updates I want to go over, and also for you guys that know my coverage of Jeffrey Crawford, you know that there was 3 people I talked about: Jeff, his wife, and her cousin. I actually have been asked by the cousin's family members to please not discuss her anymore. It's just too hard for them. So I wanted to make a new video, that way I completely kind of negate her for the family's sake. Not that I don't think she is important. The minute they tell me to continue to fight for her, I will. But it's really important to me to respect what the family wants because this is their wound. I'm just trying to help bring awareness for these people. And I love this family so much and just want to respect their wishes. And also, on top of that, those were like some of my very first videos I ever did. And even though I'm very proud of how much I've worked on this case and it being some of my first videos, I'm proud, the quality could be a lot better. And let's just say I have learned a lot since I've made those, and I've always kind of wanted to have a reason to remake it, to make it easier to watch. And to be honest, I think it's just hard to follow the case in 3 different videos like I did it. And you know, I've just learned a lot, and I absolutely adore Sheila, Jeff's mom, and I want his coverage to be as palpable as possible, and I think this will just be a lot better. I am still going to somewhat mention his wife, but I will say I'm not going to go as hard on coverage. I'm going to keep this mostly focused on Jeff. You know, I just want to respect everyone's wishes. But like I said, I will mention the wife a little bit more because, well, I mean, it's his wife. It makes more sense. But I'm really mostly going to focus on Jeff in this video. If you want to listen to more coverage on this, I have talked about this on Creepalachia. It's on there. I will say it was before the cousin's family asked me not to talk about her anymore, so you will hear details on her. Just please don't reach out to the family. Respect their wishes. But we've got a lot to go over. This case is detailed, so let's just get right in. I also want to preface, everyone talked about in this video is innocent until proven guilty. There has never been charges brought to anybody except for Jeff, which we will discuss in this case over this case. So please leave them alone. You know, law enforcement know where they are if they want to do their job and handle it, you know? I will also not be using any last names in this case, just because I want to protect their privacy as much as possible. But I don't think I did this case any justice changing the names like I did in the first videos. So if you know who these people are, please just don't drop their full names in the comments. That's unnecessary. And like I said, the police know where to find these people if they want to. So let's just get right in. William Jeffrey Crawford, who mostly went by Jeff, so that's what I'll be calling him, was born on June 29th, 1982. He was 28 at the time of his disappearance. He was a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, 6'1", around 210 pounds, and had tattoos on both arms, chest, and neck. The family member we will be talking a lot about that he was extremely close to was his mom, Sheila. I love Sheila with my whole entire heart. So she is an amazing, amazing woman and an amazing mother. And he did have a son that he was known to be a great dad to. He was very strong-headed and thought he was invincible. He did have a temper and he was a hard worker at the jobs he carried. He did work on the river on a boat that we'll talk about in a little bit. And Jeff truly thought he could save anyone. That was kind of his vice in life. He really just tried to fix people that he loved. He loved Harry Potter, so me and him definitely had that in common. But he also was a shoe fanatic. He always had the coolest name brand shoes. That also went into his clothing. He had name brand nice clothing. He took care of all of that. And honestly, he had shoes that he had never even worn twice. Like, he loved just, looking nice. He did unfortunately struggle with a pill addiction, so this is going to have a little bit of drug activity in which we talk about. But Jeff's biggest passion was tattooing. He even had his own tattoo guns that he was extremely protective over. He kept these tattoo guns with him at all times, and when he would go to work on the boat on the river, he would always leave them with someone that he could trust. A lot of the times it was Sheila, and he wouldn't let anybody touch these because he didn't want the oils on our hands to really mess with the guns itself. And he did not professionally do it like at a tattoo parlor or anything like that, but he would have people come over and tattoo them often. Now, like I said, Jeff did have a wife that I will only refer to as Ashley, and they were not even married more than a year when everything happened, and they actually married 2 or 3 months after getting together. Now, they lived in a trailer on Jeffers Ridge in Southside, West Virginia. Jeff did work really hard to help her pay off the land in the trailer that they owned. Now, Ashley did have a little bit of a record, and while she was in jail or on the house arrest with her family, Jeff lived in the trailer and worked really hard to keep it up. That way, when she got back, it was in good condition. Now, they did own a Mustang. There was a little bit of confusion, I guess I'll say, on who actually owned it, whether that was Ashley or Jeff. But at the end of the day, they both took really, really good care of this Mustang. They didn't necessarily let a lot of people drive it. And on top of that, they kept it very clean. They were clean people. Keep that in mind. They were clean people. Both of them were clean people. And Jeff absolutely loved Ashley's family. Loved Ashley's family, especially her mom, Ruth. He would go over there and do anything that they would need, like around the house, and just really cared about her and her family. Now, once Ashley was done with her sentencing and stuff like that, they moved back in together, and they had some really, really good few months. They were starting to go to church together. They were going and making a point to see each other's families. And they did. In these few months after Ashley came back home, they seemed so happy. Now, of course, everyone has rough patches, even in marriages. And so they were starting to kind of fall into that a little bit. And Jeff had talked to his mom about being a little bit fed up, and he would make comments such as, Ashley's gonna do what Ashley's gonna do, and there's no stopping her. But then Ashley also had reasons that she was upset with Jeff. She thought while she was gone, he was just living in the trailer and partying and hanging out with friends and not taking her phone calls, which I have never, by the grace of God, been in situations where I've been in jail or prison, but I'm sure that's a very lonely feeling. So I can't imagine how it would feel if Cody, my man, wasn't answering my calls while I was in there, I'd be paranoid. I'd be kind of weirded out. What is he doing? So I totally get where Ashley's coming from. But this caused some trust issues. From what I understand, Jeff was actually just working really hard to pay things off and make things great for when Ashley comes out. But Ashley didn't know that while she was in there. And she thought the worst, unfortunately. So there was some trust issues once she came out that was starting to kind of, come to a head. There were some talks around town, and this is a huge allegedly, that Jeff was abusive in ways. And people did say he was trying to alienate Ashley, but if they were going through a rough patch, I can see how people would think that. I can see how it would seem that way. If you're not happy with your significant other, sometimes no, you don't want them to go hang out with their friends and just talk total crap about you, or, being angry can seem abusive. No one was in their relationship but them, and unfortunately we might never know the true answer to that. Now, Ashley did talk to a few people about Jeff possibly being abusive, so there are accounts that she had said things to people. Take that with a grain of salt, because unfortunately that was all secondhand knowledge given to me, as you will find out later. Ashley is not here to tell us herself, but Jeff also didn't have the best things to say about Ashley either. If you're going through a hard time in your marriage, fortunately, you do talk negative to people about your significant other sometimes. And there's things Jeff talked about that made Ashley seem rebellious. So a week before everything happened, Ashley did make a Facebook post that I'll put up here, talking about how they were going to try to rent out their trailer so they could move to Myrtle Beach. Unfortunately, this did cause a lot of confusion because people thought they moved to Myrtle Beach, but they clearly never did. I just wanted to bring this up because in the timeline, this is when it happened. And you need to keep that in mind for later. There is someone that I want to bring up here named Marty. Again, nobody put his last name in the comments, please. I've heard this guy is freaking nuts. And his brother, way worse. But anyways, so he was 27 years old at the time of all this, and from... you know what? I'm not going to say where he's from, but Mason County. He allegedly, biggest allegedly in the world here, was that he was an informant. It'll make sense why I think that and why other people definitely think that when you find out everything he gets by with in this. There's a lot of people in this case that people claim are informants when you hear how everything went down. But Jeff and Marty were actually distant cousins, and they did not get along. They did not get along. From what I understand, honestly, Jeff just did not like the type of person Marty was to begin with. Didn't like his personality. They clashed. But at the same time, Marty and Ashley had a very small thing, like not even getting out the talking stage at one point. And we all know how relationships are. It just is what it is. Most of the time, you don't like the person that your wife, girlfriend was with before you, right? Especially because he already didn't like Marty, and then to find out him and Ashley had history, it just rubbed him the wrong way. And on top of that, Marty allegedly owed Jeff money. Jeff had went to collect it, again, allegedly, and Marty pretty much just would not give it to him. They ended up getting into an argument, and Marty said Jeff wasn't going to be around much longer anyway, so he wasn't even going to worry about paying it. That's weird, Marty. That's weird. Allegedly, of course, but weird. Now, Marty has an extensive record. Extensive record. 3 counts of breaking and entering, petite larceny, fleeing, battery of a government representative, and an attempt to disarm an officer. Marty and the state trooper that would be assigned to this case ended up getting into an altercation, and this is where some of the charges that we just talked about came from. They had gotten into a fight behind the K&D Diner in Gallipolis Ferry, and the state trooper was trying to arrest Marty for breaking into, I think it was a body shop next door to this diner. And they literally had Marty on camera footage that this was happening. Right? Marty then tried to take this state trooper's gun, broke this state trooper's finger, and I'm not kidding you, this case was dismissed after this man disarmed this police officer and broke his finger. And people wonder why people assume Marty's an informant. And that's just the first thing we are talking about that makes people think that. And of course, remember Marty, because we're going to need to know him later, right? Now, Jeff and Ashley had actually went to the beach and had a hookup down there and had brought back actually quite a bit of pills. Ashley was hanging out with a man named Charlie. Please, again, don't put his last name in the comments. Just don't. And Charlie was also known to, I think, recreationally use. I've never heard he's like a true addict. And so Ashley was trying to get a hold of Jeff to give her some of the pills from the beach. And Jeff said no. He was like, no, we need to sell these. Like, we need money to move. Like, we have to have this money to be able to move to Myrtle Beach. We are not just handing them out for free, because, you know, that's a dangerous slope. I get where Jeff is coming from. This is kind of murky because this was just a few days before everything happened. So it is thought, could Charlie had said something to someone even unknowingly that would have put them in danger? Because the type of pills they had, let's just say they could sell for like $100, $150 each. Like, these were worth some money, and they had a whole bottle of them. And Ashley, of course, was a little upset. I'm sure it hurt her feelings, even though I'm sure she could see where Jeff was coming from. At the same time, it's like, you know, I'm hanging out with my friend and I want to have fun. Now, shortly after, again, just a few days before they went missing, Jeff and Ashley actually were going and staying at Sheila's house. They were trying to get sober. They just, you know, needed a getaway from everything. Shortly after this, Ashley was complaining that she wanted to go home. She did not want to be at Sheila's anymore. And Sheila told Jeff to take her home. She was like, whatever. If she wants to go, go. But Sheila did tell me it seemed like Jeff knew something and he did not want to take her home at all. He was trying to keep her from using. That was the whole point of being at Sheila's, was to stay clean. So he just downright refused. And when they did ultimately leave, you know, just to go home together, he ended up calling Sheila. He told her that she had taken off on some four-wheelers and he didn't know where she was. And he really didn't know who she was with. She had been gone all day and now into the night, and pretty much said, I should have just stayed at your house. Sheila ended up talking to him about 2 or 3 times that day, and it was the same thing. Ashley was out with, he didn't know who, he didn't know when she was coming back. And at this point, Jeff did ask if he could come home, but Sheila was supportive. Like, this was his wife, you know, so she said, yeah, you can come home, but you guys are gonna work this out. It's just a rough patch. It's going to be okay. And Jeff did say, if she can't change, I don't know if I can keep doing this. She can have it all. I just want my car. On June 16th, 2011, Ashley had went to her family's house to go see her niece and nephew, and they did say she was acting kind of strange and pretty standoffish. Now, she was interacting with people, but you know what I mean, like when you get that vibe from someone. So that was kind of like the first sign something was weird that day. Ashley and her cousin then went to the Sand Hill Food Mart with Charlie and tried to get some Suboxone from someone. They had given this woman some money and she was supposed to bring it back to them, but to be honest, this girl just dipped and took their money. Then the cameras at the little country store on Crab Creek caught Ashley with Marty and a man named Clinton. Ashley ended up calling Jeff, who was at Ruth's, her parents' house, fixing something for them. Evidently, she told Jeff that someone was at the house, and Jeff immediately got off the phone and told Ruth and her dad, Gary, that he had to go. Like, abruptly had to go. Someone was at the house that wasn't supposed to be there. And that actually is the last time anybody that we know of talked to Jeff Crawford. And Ashley's dad, Gary, really did. He knew something was weird about that. Something was off. Something must have happened. Gary did end up talking to Ashley after Jeff left and asking her what was up. Why is this happening? Who was at the trailer? And where was Jeff? And she said Jeff was at the trailer. And he ended up calling his daughter a liar and told her he knew something was going on. And just a little while later, Jeff and Ashley's trailer burnt to the ground. There was gas everywhere on this trailer. There was cigarette butts everywhere. And allegedly, there was a chainsaw found in this trailer. And again, allegedly, there was substance, like bodily substance, such as blood and like tissue, found on this chainsaw. But that's a huge allegedly, because law enforcement claim this chainsaw is still in evidence, still being tested, 15 years later. But I digress. I say allegedly because technically we don't know what was on that chainsaw. They don't necessarily even claim, except to family, that this chainsaw exists. Neighbors did say that they saw a black and white man carrying a ton of stuff out of this trailer before it caught on fire to this, I think, black Ford F-150. Now, people did claim that this white man allegedly was Marty, but for sure, Marty was seen driving Jeff's Mustang that night and the next day. And ironically enough, Marty also had Jeff's tattoo guns. Now, that next day, Ruth called Sheila up and said, "Please tell me that Jeff and Ashley are at your house." And Sheila said, "No, why would they be at my house?" And that is when Ruth told Sheila about the trailer burning down. This is also the first sign for the moms that something really, really bad must have happened. Nobody could account for Jeff's whereabouts after he left Ruth and Gary's. Now, Ashley and the cousin was seen with Marty and the people that were four-wheeler riding, from what I understand, after this. So really, Jeff was missing for quite a bit longer than Ashley and the cousin. On June 16th, 2011, Sheila did end up reporting Jeff and Ashley missing. Now, anybody who knows Mason County Police Department, it's pretty widely known over West Virginia that they allegedly aren't the best. Of course, we all know the rumors about it being a fairly good old boy system, corrupt area within the police department. And you don't just hear that about this case. You could look into pretty much any missing person case in Mason County and hear the exact same thing. It's also rumored, don't sue me, rumored that, especially if it has to do with drugs, they pretty much just brush it off. They could care less. And unfortunately, that's not just Mason County. They make it a little bit more obvious than most, but we hear this all the time on this channel, right? If they've even just partied once in high school, they write them off as drug addicts and move on. I considered on going into every single police officer that was in this case and how almost all of them that touched this case have been removed, not retired, but either resigned themselves, got charges that got them taken off of the police departments, things like that. But we would be here all day. So you know what? We're not going to go into all that. But just know, I think there was 2 people that touched this case that still have a law enforcement job. And one of them, I've heard some crazy things about. But just know, unfortunately, there wasn't very good of luck for this case with who was put in the positions to look into it. Now, the initial officer that was put on this case did tell Sheila he would get this on the news, he would get this out there, and unfortunately just never did. Now, he did end up calling Ashley's cell phone on Sheila's porch, and someone actually answered. Now, he announced that he was law enforcement, and they immediately hung up and wouldn't answer again. Sheila thought this was really weird, so she pushed to, figure out, hey, did you find out who that was? Like later on, she asked, did you ever look into this? Like, what's going on? And, a few days, maybe a week or so later, he just claimed, oh, that was an old phone number for her, so it was just someone that has nothing to do with this. And Sheila thought that was really weird, because what do you mean that's an old phone number? But whatever. And this initial officer did tell Sheila that Jeff was going to be charged with arson, even though there's absolutely no proof that Jeff did anything to that trailer. This was just days after Jeff went missing, and they were already trying to blame Jeff for everything. Keep that in mind. Just a few days after they went missing. And the officer just said they were on a drug run to Myrtle Beach. It's not that big of a deal, and that they would be back. So tell me how someone who is going on a drug run to Myrtle Beach and will be back burns their trailer down and does it without their car, because the car was seen with Marty. Anyways, now the sheriff at the time was close to Jeff. Actually, they were considered pretty good friends. He didn't even know Jeff and his wife and her cousin was missing. This guy had no idea what his officers were working on, so that's interesting. But at the same time, he did help Sheila get it on the news. He did claim that the initial officer never actually wrote a report. He never saw one. And the initial officer did end up telling Sheila that she ruined this whole case by putting his face on the news. Whatever. At some point, this case was passed on to the state police, because let's just be honest, it's huge. There's a trailer that's burnt down, their car is stolen, and 3 people are missing. It was just way above probably what Mason County could do. So it was passed to the state police and given to a state trooper who was fresh out of the academy. I think had only had a job for 3 months, and what a huge case, right? To be given to someone straight out of the academy. Now, I will say that the family didn't talk to this officer. They were always kind of navigated to talk to 2 other state troopers. So these families didn't even really know who the lead investigator was once it got to the state police level. And unfortunately, state troopers just treated these girls as if they were prostitutes. They did not take them seriously at all as missing people in danger. And 2 of the state troopers pretty much told Sheila to not talk about the case. Don't talk about it, don't bring it up, and if anybody else is talking about it, just tell us, do not engage. For a while, they really believed the state troopers were just trying to keep it as hush-hush as possible. Now, I have to talk about the picture they chose to put on the news of Jeff about him being missing. Now, this picture of Jeff they posted, come on. Do you not think it looks like a mugshot? It technically is his driver's license picture. They, again, never went to Sheila and got pictures of Jeff to put on the news like we usually see, right? No, they used his driver's license picture, which looks like a mugshot. And they're already trying to blame Jeff for everything. So it's really, really hard to not think they were trying to make him look guilty already, right? Especially because the officer that did end up getting it on the news was his friend. You're telling me you didn't have any pictures of Jeff? If you weren't going to go back and get them from Sheila, you didn't have any? And then on top of that, if you're that close to Jeff, why wouldn't you just go to Sheila and ask her? So many questions. So many questions. Now, there actually was never a search done by law enforcement. The family did do quite a bit of searching, and they invited the law enforcement and actually somewhat begged law enforcement to come look for these 3 people, because what if they went on these searches and they found something, They invited them to the searches they planned because if anything was found, they wanted to know that they could handle it. What was the family going to do if they found something, But they were completely denied. And these officers drilled Jeff's family hard about everything. They interrogated them pretty roughly, from what I was told. And tips and rumors just came flooding in about it, and not really much was taken that seriously from what we can tell. Someone had even came forward and said Jeff was having a tattoo party at the trailer and Marty was wanting a tattoo. But this doesn't make much sense since he didn't even like Marty. Why would he be tattooing him? And when the police talked to Marty about all this, Marty said Clinton was the one who burned the trailer down, and even said Clinton had damage to his face that would prove it. Clinton was no longer in West Virginia, so they extradited Clinton back from Alabama, but the officer claimed that Clinton didn't know anything and hadn't done anything wrong. That they had a nice long talk, and he just didn't feel they needed to keep Clinton in custody. Now Charlie. So Charlie did end up talking to people about Jeff, Ashley, and Tonda and a black man moving to Myrtle Beach, which there was supposedly a black man carrying stuff out of the trailer with Marty. Granted, could easily be 2 different people, but it makes no sense. Why would they burn the trailer down if they were just moving to Myrtle Beach? Especially because they made that Facebook post about renting the trailer. Why would you burn a trailer down you're trying to rent? From what I understand, they were renting the trailer so they would have money for Myrtle Beach, right? But after the fire, you could see furniture still in the house, like the washer, the dryer, bed frames, the couch. They would need furniture to live in Myrtle Beach. But even if you think they bought furniture once they were in Myrtle Beach, on the Facebook post it said that this trailer could be fully furnished. So again, why in the world, if you're trying to rent a trailer, would you burn it to the ground? I never hear answers to this kind of stuff. This is the type of stuff about this case that keep me up at night, and why I'm still 5 years later talking about it. Now, another thing that's very interesting is that allegedly Marty was selling Jeff's tattoo guns. One of Jeff's relatives ended up posing as a buyer to get these tattoo guns because they wanted to see if they were actually Jeff's, right? So they ended up buying them off Marty. Once this family member got the tattoo guns back, it was clear it was Jeff's. All the tattoo equipment, the bag, everything like that was in there except Jeff's drawings, which would have been able to indicate who it was, right? But you got to remember, Jeff, if he did not have possession of his tattoo guns, his mom did. So his mom would have easily been able to identify them. So this family member, all she had to do was show Sheila and figure out if they were truly Jeff's or not. Now, there was an alleged raid down in a place called The Hole. Neighbors in this apartment complex was calling Jeff's family and telling them that there were county officers carrying just stuff out of Marty's apartment, and that this stuff looked a lot like Jeff and Ashley's, like his clothing. He had the really nice name brand clothing, the shoes, Ashley's jewelry maybe. There was a safe, a bloody bat, and some of the clothes seemed to be bloody. Again, this is all alleged. The police have never came out and actually said this is true or not. But why neighbors would lie and fake pictures, videos to send to the family in 2011 when AI is not that big and could do that kind of shit yet is beyond me, right? So I do kind of have a gut feeling this is true. But it is something else that the police claim never happened in this case, which, there's going to be a lot more of this, but my question is, then what the hell did happen in this case? Because if they are just claiming every single step of this case didn't happen, then what the hell did you do? Are you just openly saying you were completely negligent? I can't get into that rant right now. I cannot get into that rant right now. But something interesting to note is that Marty did end up having a large amount of money after the 3 went missing. Could this be because he was paid for whatever happened? I'm not saying that. I was told that, but I'm not saying that. But could it also be that he was selling this stuff in the apartment complex, allegedly, that the police was catching? Could it be he was selling Jeff's tattoo guns to his literal family member? But whatever. But it did seem that Marty had a large sum of money after all this. Gary saw this Mustang driving back and forth down the road, I think the day after they went missing, or the day after the trailer burnt down, or maybe the day of the trailer burnt down, like right around there. He kept waving because him and Jeff always waved to each other, but this person in this car was not waving. And this is just like another sign to Gary that something was wrong. What is happening? Right? But it ended up that Marty was the one driving Jeff and Ashley's car down Crab Creek. He did say that Jeff and Ashley sold this car to him for $3,000, which, why would Marty have a lot of money on him if he just bought a car for $3,000? Again, I can't go down these rabbit holes. But let's be real. Jeff and Ashley would never sell that Mustang. They love that Mustang, especially Jeff. Jeff loved that Mustang. Jeff would 100% not sell it to Marty. He didn't like Marty. One of the deputies did end up bringing this title to this vehicle to Sheila and showed it to her, in which she was very easily able to prove that Jeff's signature was forged on it. When Jeff was out on the boat working, Sheila handled his finances. So she had signatures of his. She had paperwork that had his name signed on it because she handled all that stuff. So it was very easy for her to prove that it was forged. Now, Ruth had also told me that Ashley's name was forged on there too. But Ruth said she had never saw the title. It was just kind of described to her what the signature looked like, and she knew for sure, especially by the way the A was done, because a lot of cursive A's can be written different ways, right? That it was not how Ashley wrote it. So not just Jeff, but Ashley's signature was forged on this title too. But again, Marty was never charged with anything. They just took the car into evidence, and nothing happened to Marty for having a stolen car with a forged title. Something also I want to bring up is this chainsaw. Why, if these people were so clean, would they bring a chainsaw into the house? Right? And like I said, when the family would ask what DNA was found on this chainsaw, they have been told, literally to this day, that the DNA has not came back. That they're still doing testing on this chainsaw. 15 years later, my dad, 15 years later, they still have no answers on what was on this chainsaw. I'm going to go over this part fairly briefly because this is a whole other crime that I'm still waiting on a FOIA request for, that I've requested and still have not heard back from. I'm about to request again. So until I get all the details of this case from the actual reports and stuff, I'm not going to speak as deeply about it as I have in the past, because this might just be its whole video in itself. But there was a man named Renee that allegedly was going to pick up his daughter from a man named Chad's house. That was like her stepdad. He heard 2 girls screaming at this house. It seemed like Chad had like this cabin type shack thing on his property, and a lot of people think that might have been where the screaming came from. This is all alleged, of course, all alleged, but it is interesting that this person, Renee, claims that he heard 2 girls screaming from this guy's house, right? With 2 girls missing. And this is like the type of stuff I want the FOIA request for. I want to know if they have this 911 call. I want to know what all Renee said to police about this. But if I get that, we'll do a whole video on it, right? But supposedly, allegedly, all the things, Renee left Chad's house and immediately called the police and told them what he heard. He didn't even make it all the way out Millstone, I think is the road, before he had to pull over and call the police. Like, it freaked him out that bad. Now, 2 weeks after these 3 went missing, and I'm not exactly sure the exact time frame after he heard the 2 girls screaming, this man was actually murdered on his front porch. Now, from what I can find online and things like that about this case, they do make it seem like it might not be over the girls, that he was just trying to, like, people were trying to rob him. But all these people really are connected to this case in a weird way. It kind of is what it is, right? But this is why I want to get a FOIA request and see what happened to Renee with my own eyes from the documents, which is in Mason County, so maybe it's not 100% great, but better than internet, right? So stay tuned for a video on him. But this freaked everyone out in the community and really made people believe the girls were in extreme danger, right? Extreme danger. A little less than 6 weeks after all 3 went missing, there was a couple and their dog that would walk down this road and, you know, every day. So it was pretty like routine and normal. Now their dog started acting a little weird, trying to run over a hill and all the things that, you know, dogs do when they're hunting. The dog would go down to this area and start barking, and this happened for like a week. This dog would just freak out at this one area. He even started kind of digging in that area, but I mean, if you own dogs, I'm sure you get it. You're like, no, come back up here, please stop. Like, you know, like you're constantly calling for your dog if they're acting out like that, because in their mind it's acting out. So it was never discovered by the dog what it was trying to hunt. At this point, Chad is in jail for the conspiracy of Renee's murder at this point, and Chad's family had been visiting him. And around 6 weeks after these people went missing, his family member Devin, who had been visiting Chad in jail, was down on a creek bank looking for arrowheads. And this is where he found one of the girls' hands. And he went to go tell the police. Now, people think this is weird because if you grew up in West Virginia, I'm sure you went arrowhead hunting at some point as a kid. And arrowheads are not found on creek banks. They're found in big fields and stuff like that. And people do wonder if Chad told Devin where these girls were, because it was right after he visited him that he found these girls. The irony in that, right? The irony. The girls were found in a shallow grave around 8:30 p.m. and this was off Duncan Creek Road and Gallipolis Ferry. They were placed in an area where deer and cattle were, you know, usually buried, so it was kind of still like a burial area, and it was on this man's property that was also charged in Renee's death. So you can see why Renee's kind of tied into this. Like I said, it was a common dump site, but it was fairly small. It was only like 4 feet long and 2.5 feet wide. And it really wasn't long enough for the girls' legs to be stretched out. And so the girls were kind of laying on top of each other. And there was also plastic and duct tape found around this site. But Jeff was never found. Jeff to this day is still missing. Now, the state police did go to Ashley's house and talk to her dad and said, is there any type of markings or anything on Ashley that we could help identify? And her parents said, yeah, she has tattoos, and kind of listed tattoos off and stuff like that. And that's how they ended up identifying these girls. was from their skin and their tattoos on their skin, even though supposedly these girls have been dead in this shallow grave for 6 weeks in the dead of summer. And if you guys are into true crime as much as I am, you know one of the first things that starts breaking down when people die, especially in heat, is your skin. It just kind of proved that these girls probably weren't dead for 6 weeks. Not to be blunt about it, but they just probably weren't gone that long. Now, there was a 2-day excavation of this area. They brought in the state police, they brought in the Smithsonian Institute, and were really able to case this area. They were able to tell that one of them was shot once, execution style, and that the other was shot execution style, but also shot in the foot. So it is thought that one of them was killed while the other tried to run. Now, Sheila did go and ask doctors and professionals about these remains. How was this possible if they had been dead for 6 weeks? 6 weeks, that their skin was the identifiable factor in this. And Sheila was told across the board that wasn't possible. Now, someone that was four-wheeler riding with them at the time of the disappearance did go to police and say that she saw Jeff kill him that night. Jeff was mad that Ashley was hanging out with Marty, and he came and only killed Ashley and her cousin right there in front of everybody. I have a lot of thoughts about this and a lot of details I'm choosing to leave out about this person this time around, but let's just say she is not the most credible person in the world. And on top of that, again, like, even if you just take her credibility out of it, think about what we just said. They were identified by tattoos on their skin 6 weeks in the dead of summer after they went missing. So if Jeff really did kill them 6 weeks before, there's no way their skin would have been identifiable. Now, Sheila was trying to get Jeff's profile made on NamUs. She had brought it to 2 of the officers, I think state troopers, and asked them, hey, can we get this rolling? Can we get a NamUs profile made? I'm not kidding you. They told her they didn't know what NamUs was. So she just went on her own to really work to get this NamUs profile made. NamUs sent her everything to send in DNA for him, and one of the state troopers stopped the process and told her she was going to contaminate it. She had to come in and do it. She kind of rolled her eyes at that because, I mean, they haven't handled this case well at all to begin with, so she didn't really trust them, but she went along with it. She went in, and the state trooper that threw a fit about this wasn't even there. He had another officer take the DNA and everything. So I think that's interesting, but whatever. Just like another roadblock for Sheila to figure out what happened to her son, I guess. Now, a lot of people believe that this is over a drug debt, right? There was rumors that I heard multiple times that either Jeff or Ashley, or maybe as a unit, since they're married and they did use together, owed $8,000 to somebody. They believe that Jeff was actually the target because, first of all, he's the man in the marriage. He's the one that would most likely it be taken out on, and that the girls walked into the trailer and saw what happened, and that's why they were also targeted. Now, there's no legitimate proof of that, but that is what almost everyone told me they thought happened and that they had heard happened and what this all was about. The families have all mentioned to me, all 3 of them, that the police did seem to try to separate them in this case, that they put a wedge between all 3, so especially the girls and Jeff's family, because they couldn't share information very easily together that way. They wouldn't trust each other, and it would be way harder for them to kind of work on their children's case in general together. But that's also alleged, who knows? But that's how they felt. The FBI and CIA refused to get involved. Of course, they do have to be invited in, so it could be that they just were never invited in. But at some point, the FBI did start just ignoring calls about this case. They said they couldn't touch it until it was a cold case and there was nothing they could do. Now, something that is very interesting I want to talk about, and throw the biggest alleged on here on this too, because the police also claim this never happened, even though multiple people that allegedly worked this case has told the family that it is 120% true. I should say families. The families were told this is 100% true. Is that there was a man named Bobby picking berries, even though berries were not in season at this time, but whatever. And he found a forearm that had tattoos that exactly matched Jeff. Now, this is found in a place called Blackie Holler, right on Gordon Creek and Duncan Creek. And one of Jeff's family members had heard it ring through the police scanner she had. And the case matched Jeff's NCIC number. But then the sheriff at the time jumped on this broadcast and pretty much said, "This is public. Shut it down. Quit talking about it now." And like I said, multiple people, including the person's house that all the vehicles parked at, including people that worked this case, told the families this for sure happened, even though law enforcement completely deny it. So let's talk about Jeff's reward money, because that is also sketchy, because of course it is. There's actually a $10,000 reward for the location of Jeff's body. Now, the state police actually wanted a hold of this fund, but as you can tell, the families and almost all the public believe that they did not handle this case well. So Sheila didn't trust for them to have a hold of this money. So Sheila ultimately said no. She wanted to be in control of this reward. And I'm not kidding you. The day after this, they issued a warrant for Jeff's arrest for the murder of the two girls. And then the trooper that's over the case pretty much said, "We'll never figure out what happened in this case unless we find Jeff." I just feel like there is not 1 ounce of this case that these families feel they got justice in, or that the police were working with them instead of against them. And talking about the police working actively against the families, let's discuss the Mustang again. Sheila wanted this Mustang because she had seen it parked in Henderson, when they were investigating it. And she actually has pictures I'll put on the screen of evidence bags within this Mustang. They had said they had never found any evidence or anything like that. So she thought, fine, well, shouldn't the Mustang be released if they ruled that there was nothing found in it? And she actually hired a lawyer and sued the state police to get this Mustang back. Allegedly, the state police told her she was never getting this car back. So she decided, yeah, I'm taking legal action. Good for her, right? Good for Sheila. Now, once it was ruled that the car had to be released to Sheila, she went to pick it up, and the state police still acted like they had no idea what she was talking about and that she couldn't get the car. So then the court had to go back and tell them, you have to release this car. We ruled that you were done with the evidence, you were done looking into it, release the car. You say there was nothing in it, there's no evidence found, and that it's not needed anymore. Give her the car. And when she got it back, there was no evidence bags in it, which of course, right? Of course. But they still claim there was no evidence found. Something though that is really interesting, they had the car for a couple years at this point. What's really interesting though is, I'll also pop these pictures up. When Sheila got the car back, first of all, filthy. These people were so clean, but it was not even just dirty. There was damage. There was literally damage. The car seat was cut. I'll put the pictures up. Like, there was something that happened in that car. I think it looks like a handprint, like fingerprints on the seats and areas. But also, they must have thought that there was something in this car because there was evidence markers up to 114. Yet there was nothing found in this car. Is that not so weird? Unfortunately, there is no reason to really believe that Jeff is alive. There's been no cell phone activity, no bank activity, no social security number activity, nothing like that. Nobody from any of the states that he has ties to has seen him, and honestly, the police never even looked in those states. Well, his son at the time lived in Florida. Never went down there and asked them. He had family in New York. They never went and asked them about anything. He had a brother in North Carolina who was never talked to. He was in the military at some point, so he had friends all over. If, like, you thought he was on the run, you searched none of those places. Never talked to anybody in those places. And people do believe that the person that possibly did this is either dead, in jail for other things, or hiding out somewhere. It is believed that Jeff was killed first and the girls came and walked in on whatever happened. And people do believe it probably happened in the trailer, and that's why the trailer was burnt down to cover evidence, and that the stuff being carried out of the trailer, especially the black trash bags, unfortunately might have had Jeff in it, and that the chainsaw was used to dismember him. Of course, it's thought that the girls did not die right away, right? And that they could have possibly used them to collect more money for the debt that Jeff and possibly Ashley had. This also could be why Jeff was so adamant to not just give away the pills, but sell them, trying to get that money back for their debt. And it could be possible that Charlie or even Ashley had told Marty he had these, and he became a target. And ultimately, Ashley and her cousin were too. It is thought that Marty might have gotten the Mustang out of payment for whatever happened, but of course that's a huge alleged, because honestly, nobody, even though people do believe that Marty knows something, nobody can come out right out and say he did anything. Nobody's 100% sure what his involvement in this was. All we know is it is extremely sketchy. He was with these people that day and then ended up with all their belongings afterwards, right? There are multiple rumors on what has happened to Jeff. I've heard everything from being put in the river, being put in wells that's actually closed over now. I've heard fed to pigs. I've heard all types of stuff. I will say my nonprofit did do a search for Jeff where we even dug. We brought an excavator in and dug. I won't say where it was because it is a private property and I don't want to dox them. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely still searches happening for Jeff when we get legitimate tips. And people are still really, really trying to find Jeff out there. And people are very interested. We get, well, maybe not the nonprofit itself, but I get tons of people still to this day talk to me about it. And the awareness is coming back with a vengeance for Jeff also. Now, there was a story told to the families that I think really, really kind of match if you put everything together. There's always going to be some questions, right? But it is thought that maybe the girls were held at this cabin, the cabin that was on Chad's property. Now, a story that I heard multiple times was that Jeff was called back to the trailer. He was confronted by the people they owed money to, and that they had shot him in the leg, not to kill him, but to scare him, to give them the money. But he accidentally ended up bleeding out. While he was bleeding out, he obviously died, and that is why they ended up dismembering him, because they freaked out. They didn't mean to kill him, right? And that at some point in this, the girls showed up, and because the girls showed up and saw what happened, they couldn't leave them to just tell everybody or tell anybody. And so that's why they were captured also. They are thought that they were held in that cabin that we talked about earlier, and that unfortunately they were killed too once there was no more reason to keep them alive, maybe not making any more money. It was getting too much of a hassle. And so let's talk about who to contact. There are multiple places on here. So if you don't feel comfortable with the law enforcement involved, you can always go other avenues, right? With the West Virginia State Police Mason County Detachment, you can get a hold of Sergeant Starcher at 304-675-0850. You can actually get a hold of the U.S. Marshals too, because they have had their hands a little bit in this case. There's a P.O. box that you can send anonymous tips to at P.O. Box 73, Point Pleasant, West Virginia 25550. And you can always email me if you want to stay anonymous at unsolvednwv@gmail.com, and I will send anything credible to police for you. And I've talked to a lot of people about this case, a lot of people in Mason County, a lot of the families, and actually law enforcement, that I won't go very much more into that because, I'm never going to just out my sources like that. But a lot of people say that it's very interesting that every single thing they claim didn't happen only really had to do with Jeff. I have also heard that they put a warrant out for Jeff's arrest because with that, they don't have to make it a cold case. On top of that, that means you can't request any type of records in this case because it's an open investigation. So this gives them the leeway to not have to look into the case really any further because, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinions, they know where Jeff is, and he's definitely not alive and definitely didn't have anything to do with the murders of these girls. But because there's an active warrant, they don't have to continue to look, but makes it look like they're still looking, right? I know a lot of people think that they actively sabotage this case from the beginning, but I honestly don't think that. The longer I am a part of this case, I really think it's a situation that they were extremely negligent at first, and now it's kind of like they have to cover themselves for how negligent they were. I could be completely off on that, but it does seem that way because, unfortunately, drug addicts in West Virginia, or even if you're just a recreational drug user, you use one time in high school, you're written off pretty easy. And I think this is a situation that a lot of people think when addicts go missing, they are going to pop back up, or they're going to find them overdosed or something like that, so they don't put a whole lot of fight into finding them right away. And that is just the horrific reality here in West Virginia and other states too, but I'm from West Virginia, so I see it the most here. And especially when you have a police department that really doesn't have a good reputation from the jump, right? Like, they just, unfortunately, don't treat missing person cases that well in this county. Like, if we're just going to be honest, in a lot of counties, but Mason County is kind of notorious for it. And that's all alleged, of course. I mean, that's just also the public's opinion, but I can't say that for fact. But look into other Mason County cases, and trust me, it's unfortunate. And I think this case, just, they did not expect it to be as detailed as it was, or as big as it was. I think they really just assumed 3 people that were in active addiction didn't take care of themselves. That something in their control happened, and because they were negligent, they now have to cover themselves the whole way through. And that's just really, really sad. But thank you guys so much for listening again to Jeff's case and letting me make the corrections that the other family member wanted of not having her name involved anymore. And I tried to not put as much weight on Ashley either, just in case her family didn't want to. But thank you guys, seriously, so much for listening again and listening to Jeff's story. And thank you again for always keeping it alive. This was the very first family case that I ever worked with. And Sheila means so much to me, including the other two moms, of course, too. I will always advocate for Jeff, and I'm never going to stop till we figure out something. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want more content from me, I've been on Creepalachia, where I've actually talked about this case, and Mountain State Mysteries. I have a Facebook page that I'm trying to get to 500. That's my new goal. And it's APAL in West Virginia, so you can go follow that. You can go follow my Instagram that I am notoriously inconsistent on. So help me get my engagement back up on there because it is trash. But thank you guys again so much for watching and listening to Jeff's case, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.